It would be impossible to answer this question generally, for the best depends so much on both the skills plus prior knowledge and the interests of the reader. Best written, best in content, best in influence. While the best philosophy book for an absolute beginner may well be Justine Gardner's Sophie's World, and definitely not Aristotle's Metaphysics, it is certainly the other way around for your regular philosophy buff. Marx made a splash, but is it one of the best philosophical works of all time? PFFT, please. And how to decide between an easy-to-read and pedagogical work and a revolutionary but reaally difficult and off-putting work, which is the best? So, even with these worries, I think what makes sense is to try to offer a list of books that every serious philosophy fan should at some point read, whether at the beginning or much later with mature philosophical skills. I will make this more difficult for myself by restricting the list to 10 works with an honorary mention. I have a bias in Western philosophy, sorry about that, my handicap. I'll order these by importance, and I'll order them by ease of reading, the order it would make sense to read them in parentheses. Okay, so Tony's top 10, here we go. Immanuel Kant, Critique of Pure Reason, 9 Aristotle, Metaphysics 6 Plato, The Republic 1 Benedictus de Spinoza, Ethics 7 René Descartes, Meditations on First Philosophy Discourse on the Method 2 David Hume, A Treatise of Human Nature 5 St. Thomas Aquinas, Summa Theologica 8 Ludwig Wittgenstein, Philosophical Investigations 3 Martin Heidegger, Being and Time 10 Jean-Jacques Rousseau, The Social Contract 4 Notes. I really wish I could have chosen a work in analytic 20th century philosophy, but I find that no single book stands out that I could recommend over the top 10. The same goes for Nietzsche and Kierkegaard, great and important philosophers with many works, yet none stand out above the others. Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics would also deserve to be on this list, but ultimately I think that his Metaphysics, while as dry as they come, just stands as the unmoving foundation of Western metaphysics, only dethroned by Critique of Pure Reason that deconstructed those foundations. Plato had so many great works that it hurts my heart to choose just one, kind of like Sophie's Choice, but with books. But at least the choice is clear. With Descartes I really could not choose between the two partially overlapping works, so I cheated, choose whichever you want. The first is the classic, the second is more useful. I personally have a big love for the Enlightenment. You'll understand a lot of the present political and social debates we have much better as a result of reading those books. I'd therefore suggest anything from David Hume. It's all really accessible and often quite funny. The Treatise of Human Nature is an incredibly ambitious philosophical project and really intriguing, but a bit long. It does, however, introduce Hume's guillotine and the idea of differentiating normative claims from factual ones. I'd recommend starting with the Enquiry concerning human understanding and the dialogues concerning natural religion to start. The Zhuangzi or Chuang-Tzu. Lots of this work can be a little hard to understand as they're based heavily on existing Chinese literary conventions, but once you start reading, there's just really fascinating analysis. This aspect of Taoist thought has influenced everyone from the anarchists to the libertarians. Bakunin's God and State. It's a really fascinating introduction to anarchist thought. The Diamond Sutra. Jack Kerouac viewed it as one of the most important pieces of literature ever written, and it's a great introduction to some of the more complex aspects of Buddhist thought. Rousseau's Discourses. I disagree with Rousseau on a lot of things, but the two books, Discourse on the Arts and Sciences and the Discourse on Inequality, are so crucial to understand 2.5 centuries of politics, art and philosophy, everything from Marx to Frankenstein, that it's worth reading. There's also some really powerful language that Rousseau uses, including one of my favorite quotes, but when I see the others sacrifice pleasures, repose, wealth, power, and life itself for the preservation of this sole good which is so disdained by those who have lost it. When I see animals born free and despising captivity break their heads against the bars of their prison, when I see multitudes of entirely naked savages scorn European voluptuousness and endure hunger, fire, the sword, and death to preserve only their independence, I feel that it does not behoove slaves to reason about freedom. I use the version Chomsky likes to quote because of the strength of the language, Modern translations vary a little in the language used, but the sentiment is certainly still there. A lot of Plato is still very useful, including the Euthyphro, the Phaedo, and the Crito. In particular, the Crito contains a really wonderful argument where Socrates points out that, no matter what he might personally think of the justice of Athens, it is the height of hypocrisy for him to try to escape that fate when he reaped the benefits of that society for decades. Now, for some works that didn't make the list. Aristotle is hard to recommend because the quality of his work has over time varied so much. The Politics is actually still really insightful. But we've since moved way past his science and his understanding of aesthetics. His ethics are pretty complex and deserve to be compared to the Buddha. Similarly, I didn't include the Tao Te Ching. I didn't want to include the Bible and the Koran, even though they can be great reads, because I felt it was important to focus on primarily philosophical texts and because of their length. I love Kant, but his work can be really hard to read. While it can be worth it to slog through, a lot of his work can be better accessed through other means and summaries, leaving the minutiae to scholars. I also didn't include some great postmodern work like Baudrillard's The Gulf War did not take place, a lot of Foucault, etc. because I've always found a lot of the postmodern project both incoherent and fundamentally flawed. There's some great work in there, but it's hard to separate out from some of the peculiarities of the often pathological French intellectual culture.